I would imagine there's a lot of overlap between the two. So the whole idea is 7 pillars are all the foundation for the top killers, essentially, with the exception of one in humans, which is accidents.
Yeah, and technically, one in pets is your vet. You and your vet, right? Choosing euthanasia. Like it used to be that humans and animals would just get old and die. Now you don't hear anyone, but I mean, how many times does the news try and do clickbait and go, so and so, died, and it's never of old age. It's always a disease. It's always a condition. It's always a thing, and that's what's happening with our pets, except that we're instrumental in that process. So it's really the top. I mean, the 7 pillars defeat probably 70 killers, right? But the top 5 are, always the headline ones that we get to talk about, because you can, if let's say, I mean, we've been talking about dental a lot with pets with our last month's Rejuvenate stuff and the workshop and things. And I think for a lot of people, that's an invisible one. It's one they just don't think about. They don't hear about, they don't know about. It's not like you have a pet dentist that so it's not even on the radar. And yet it has such a big effect on pet longevity. And as a result, then it has an effect on lots of other diseases too. So something like the dental one, really, yes, you talk about dental as where it's all starting from, but the repercussions are huge. So just in and of itself, you could make that one killer probably 10 or something, right? So this is why I'm confident to say that the 7 pillars really are the solution to, let's say, the top 70 killers.
Yeah, absolutely. Each one has so many downstream effects that they're so connected. And that's the whole idea, is none of these exist in isolation. So in humans, if 4 out of the 5 killers are preventable, for the most part, diseases. So heart disease is number 1, cardiovascular disease. So not only is that like heart attacks, but that's also strokes. Not only is that the number 1 killer worldwide, across, like, literally worldwide, in humans, but it's also the most preventable. Like, can we just
That's interesting? That's interesting, because you don't get that impression on the outside. I'm not in the human medical space, right? So on the outside, looking in, hearing about heart disease, heart atherosclerosis, all these things, you don't get the impression that it's controllable.
No. And we've seen a very large increase in it didn't used to be the number 1 killer, right? We've seen a massive increase in the number of people who are getting them. That used to be really like a kind of first world Western problem, and now it's worldwide. So we're seeing the effects of that. That's not genetic. That's not, right? That is a lifestyle based. Mm-hmm. So the number 1 killer is the most preventable. So heart disease.
I mean, that's actually encouraging. I'm just going to pause there, because tell us the rest in a second, but that's actually encouraging to know that the single biggest threat as a human, you can do an awful lot about. You don't have to have the fear.
Yeah. And when you think about how it starts so early, I mean, it starts literally.
Yeah, weren't you telling me like teenagers or something? Was that?
Yeah, so when they've done autopsies on teens, so aged 16 to 20, who died of causes not related to heart disease, right? Because you're not usually seeing 16-year-olds die of heart disease, but you know, kids who die in car accidents and homicides and things like that, they find evidence of atherosclerosis in the autopsy, meaning that their heart disease was starting before the age of 20. And our diagnostic markers aren't, I mean, we were talking about this yesterday in our coaching group. Our diagnostic markers, your conventional lipid panel, your HDL, LDL, total cholesterol, it doesn't tell you enough. But there are markers that we can use to identify it much earlier on. In fact, so we have they use a risk calculator to determine like when they should intervene. And so they put in all of your numbers, and then they say, okay, your 10-year risk of, or is it 5-year risk? I don't remember. I think it's your 10-year risk. Your 10-year risk of having a heart disease is X percentage. And they don't address it until it gets over a percentage. Well, you can't even run the calculator if you're under the age of 40.
What?
Yeah, it doesn't, like, it breaks. It can't, it's not meant to do it. So you're already starting in your 40s. And then it doesn't make any sense, because it's like, okay, if someone's smoking cigarettes, we're not going to wait until they have evidence, like obvious evidence on the outside of like cancer, until we're like, hey, this is something we should talk about. Like, let's encourage you to reduce your risk and see if we can cut back, right? Like, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we talking about that in the same way for literally the number one killer early on, when we know it starts early on? At no point is it safe to be smoking cigarettes. In the same way, at no point is it safe to be living a lifestyle that fosters heart disease, because we know that that's going to start early, and yet we just wait. And so when you think about the stats, so we think of it as like an old person's disease, but it's not. Half of the heart, the cardiovascular events, heart attack, stroke, that happen in men, half of them are before the age of 65.
Yeah, and wow.
A third of them are before the age of 54. And when you can't even run the risk calculator until you're 40, like,
doesn't help.
It is, to your point, it is encouraging to think, okay, the number one killer is the most preventable. And also, it's interesting that, not being in that on the human side of things, that's not common knowledge, that it is the most preventable, because we just wait. We have someone chiming in from Chattanooga saying good morning.
That'll be, hi, Ron.
Ron said, oh, I'm 55 with a scared and laughing emoji. Well, here's the thing, is you can be empowered to, if you know what markers to look for, you can really get a good understanding of your risk. So, okay, that's number one. Then I don't remember the exact order, but the other top three that are more lifestyle related, we have neurodegenerative diseases. So that's like your dementia, your Alzheimer's, things like that.
Yeah.
That's very real. And we also have cancer. And we also have, so cancer is number 2. We also have diabetes, and this is what we were talking about earlier, diabetes and its kind of downstream effects, consequences, diseases. So in and of itself, diabetes isn't one of the top 5, but when you look at everything that goes along with it, the numbers add up to be in the top.
Yeah, metabolic dysregulation.
Exactly.
You know, we in the pet world, we call it diabesity, right? Yes. Because you often have the fat pet, or the, you know, sometimes it's primates in the zoo as well because of other reasons. But the weight issue, and then the insulin insensitivity, the diabetic, the type 2 especially diabetic things start to kick in, and then you've got that chronic inflammation rising up. You've got the fat holding on to the toxins. The whole metabolic thing gets dysregulated, and then it really is that downward spiral. So we just clump it together and go diabesity.
And the metabolic dysregulation plays a role. This goes back to everything being connected. We categorize them as different diseases, right? They have different presentations, but they share much of the same pathophysiology, meaning this metabolic dysfunction feeds into cancer. It feeds into heart disease. So while it seems like, oh my gosh, how do I combat all of them? It's like the same foundation, the same 7 pillars are going to, at the very root of it, address that beginning stage of most of them, not
absolutely
death, which is the 5th, but that's pretty
yeah, it's so liberating, because you don't have to worry about 700 diseases. You just have to concern yourself with 7 pillars that will address pretty much the whole shebang, because most, if not all, of these chronic lifestyle diseases are starting from the same point, and it's just they're going to present differently in different people's bodies according to where the chink in their armor is. right? Where you've got your weak spot, where you've got your vulnerability, your proverbial Achilles heel, right, is going to be where that starts to sort of show itself, right? And it's like that iceberg that peaks over the top of the waves. It's like, that that's not just a little chunk of ice there, that there's this great big monster of thing underneath, right? So when we see that poke above, it's like, okay, let's pay attention immediately, do something to address that, because it's not just that little bit there that you'll happen to see. There's a whole lot of junk going on down here, and when you look at that, you can dig into this, and then you can get rid of all of that, and then you go back to being 25 and fit and sparkly and energized and resilient.
Yeah, the iceberg analogy is such a good one, because it's the same in terms of, right, we're heading towards it. It's there. What do they say? 90% of the iceberg is under the water. It's all there, and we're going towards it, and we're not actually identifying it till we see that part that's sticking in.
Unless, of course, we are doing these preventative diagnostic tests that actually really have value to what they're looking at. And that's what I would really encourage pet parents to be doing. Pet parents for their pets and for themselves is taking these preventative things, going to your GP, but like a holistic, regenerative, functional, integrative, a GP who really works with proper diagnostic testing and will take the preventative approach and dig in. Because if you go regularly and do a panel like that on a regular basis, whatever that happens to be, I don't know, but then before that iceberg even emerges out of the waves, you're chipping it away, you're seeing where is it growing, how can I melt it down, how can I get rid of that, and you'll never get a presentation of a disease. I mean, that
and it's the same when it comes to diabetes. So the term insulin resistance is becoming more prevalent now, but essentially insulin resistance is what's causing the diabetes. But same thing with our diagnostics for diabetes. We wait until it's what we say is the cutoff for diabetes, which is so high, your blood sugar is so high. But if we, instead of looking at your blood sugar, if we looked at, what's happening with your insulin, which is going to cause your blood sugar to go high, then we can catch it. We can catch it before it becomes diabetes, before it becomes pre-diabetes, so that we can see this is what's starting to happen. We know it will technically become diabetes, but we don't have to wait for it to get there. So many people come to me and say, hey, I was diagnosed with pre-diabetes, and I was told not to do anything about it until it becomes diabetes. I was like, what are you doing? And they're like, I think I want to try to do something about it now. And I'm like, good.
Yes, you do.
Yes. Okay, Ron chimed in. Ron said, can't wait to have you on a podcast and discuss my accident and the healing process and the way the body reacts. Ron, we're very excited to go on your podcast and talk about this. You have been on a pretty amazing, this is an interesting piece of that fifth killer of the accidental accidents, right? You were in a very severe accident and you survived. And now it's that flip side of how can we strengthen your body to recover? And so in that way, the lifestyle piece, the 7 pillars are still going to support with that. And I don't know, you must have been doing something a little bit right to have been able to make it out the other end of that accident.
Absolutely.
So yes, excited to dive in more. But Penny, I've been taking up the whole time. So, okay, so those are the top 5 in humans.
Well, I just want to jump in on that though before. So cancer is another one that you've mentioned, and it's obvious, and it's one of the 5 for pets too. So there's no surprise there. We hear, the rates of cancer are just insane. But the standard testing for, at least in humans, is, things like mammograms and all this kind of stuff. But realistically, those are only going to be catching and starting to see things at about, in most cases, about 8 to 10 years after that cancerous process has really begun, right? So you're looking at a very long span of time where the standard imaging or testing is not helpful. Whereas we can use thermography, which is amazing, which doesn't have that invasive approach on the body. Nothing has to be prodded or poked or squished or manipulated, right? It's a photograph And the thermography will give you tiny, like way earlier in time, catching it and seeing it, so that people can be far more proactive on that. So I just share that, so that if people have never heard of thermography, that may be something to be saying when you go in for your annual checkup with the doctor or something, is right. Can I be, I don't know what the word thermographized, is that a thing? I don't know. Anyway, but to ask for that kind of a test as part of your wellness checkup, because don't you want to know, like 1 year into the process as opposed to 10 years into the process? Yeah, of course you do. That's going to have a huge impact on your life. And we almost don't even need to be looking at thermography with pets, because the statistics are already showing us it's a 1 to 1.65 dogs. Like, it's almost every dog now.
Okay, wait. Switch that to a percentage. What is that? Or 1 in every how many dogs?
1 in every 1.65 dogs. So it's not even 1 in 2.
More than 50%.
Imagine you and I are a dog right now. We're both dogs, right? That statistic, half the time is going to say that we both got it, and half the time is going to say one of us got it, right? It's not even 1 in 2. So
is that gets cancer or dies from cancer in dogs?
Gets cancer. Right?
And I wonder how many of them aren't even diagnosed, but are euthanized before, for whatever reason. You know, a lot of people don't actually, for whatever reason, maybe finances or, you know, whatever else, something's going on with their dog, and they put the dog down instead of figuring out exactly what it is, because they know they're not going to pursue the route of trying to help the animal heal. So I wonder if that number is even higher because of the undiagnosed.
I mean, it can't get a lot higher. So let's just go with the as a dog parent, I think we need to be thinking, unless I take proactive early steps, this will happen at some point. It's not a question of if anymore. It's just a question of when.
Yeah.
Right. And okay, that's the same with death. Death is a when, not an if, right? But cancer is now, for dogs at least, becoming that exact same thing. It's a when, not an if. At least we can do something about cancer. We can't do anything about the death. That's going to happen at some point. But we can do something about the cancer, and therefore the quality of life, the length of life, the joy of life, the freedom, and all the rest of it that we talk about. So I love it when clients come to me when they've just adopted. They've just adopted their babies and they're bringing them home, and they're like, right, tell me how to save them from all the things. And it's like, sure, it's super easy. It's these 7 things. This is how you would roll that out in your life. There are 10. Let me give you 10 things inside each pillar. That's a playbook then of like 70 actions that you can take, and you can take that over whatever length of time. And then once you've got to that 70, and those things become a normal part of your life, then you can have another 70 if you want to. Like, you can. There's always more that you can go. But if you don't set that up, ideally as early as possible, but any day is the right day to start. Like, you can have an 18-year-old dog, right, which most people don't even have anymore, but you can have an 18-year-old dog and start now, and you will see a visible improvement in them, in their physicality, in their condition, in their behavior, in their energy, in their lifespan, in less than 3 months. Like, you just can.
I switched Peanut to a species appropriate diet when she was literally the first time when you told me about it that I'd ever even heard the term. She was 14, and now she's 16, and like, yeah, I mean, it's, the effects were very quick, very noticeable. To this day, every time my in-laws see her, I mean, again, this has been, you know, a while now that she's been, every time my in-laws see her, they're like, oh my gosh, her coat is like amazing. It's profound. Yeah. And I have no doubt that those changes have helped her not only live longer, because I think that the infection she had might have killed her if her body hadn't gotten stronger from making those changes. But it's also given her so much quality of life back. So yeah, it's never too late. And, you know, when we made those changes, Birdie was only a few months old. So and of course you can see it at such a young age. So yeah, it's never too late. So what are the other top killers in our pets?
So we have, for dogs, it's without a doubt, it's cancer. Without a doubt. Cancer is pretty high up there for cats as well, but it kind of gets pipped at the post by chronic kidney disease. So that's brutal. That is really brutal. And it is almost completely avoidable. Like, it's you give me a cat, when they're 6 months old, right? And I'll set them up with their little pattern, their little lifestyle, and how they're going to be looked after. They won't get chronic kidney disease. So there's those two. Diabetes, as I said, this chronic epidemic of us overfeeding our pets and giving them the wrong food, giving them carbohydrate-rich food when they're carnivores and they don't need it, and all the onwards things from that. And again, like you say, it's really often not the diabetes itself that kills them, but it's the whole metabolic dysregulation and the system shutting down and the toxic overload and things like that. Then we have the dental. So if you don't fix what's happening in here, it starts to get everywhere in the body and causes all kinds of problems. And as I said, euthanasia is the biggest one. And unfortunately, again, in that, so much of why people are choosing that pathway to terminate their pet's life early, I've forgotten the statistic. It's not in front of me right this second, but it's a high number. That's actually behavioral issues. People are saying, too hard, can't work with that, crazy dog, mental, doesn't, right? Behavior, they're not even sick.
And didn't you say one of the other ones of major reasons why people euthanize their pets is like itchiness?
Yeah.
Those are two really.
There's no reason to die from either of those two things. There really isn't. And the chronic itchiness, the skin problems, the smelliness, a chronically itchy dog is a miserable beast. There's no two ways about it. So I can understand to some extent the motivation for someone to intervene, and they've tried everything.
There's nothing they can do, right?
So again, it's this thing of I've quote unquote tried everything, right, but in fact you actually haven't, because you've only tried what your vet knows to provide or what your friends know to suggest or whatever. But we know that itchy skin is a manifestation of a chronic toxification problem and probably a gut issue as well. So if we address, and of course those are two of our pillars for the 7 pillars, right? So when we address those two things, itchiness and discharges from the ears and always licking your feet and your paws, right, all those things disappear, and now you have a dog whose fur is gorgeous, whose skin is gorgeous, who's just like beaming, and it was all completely avoidable. I mean, the thousands and thousands, and I don't even know the number. It's a scary number of dogs that die every year because they're itchy.
Yeah, I went through that with Peanut, and oh my gosh, I spent thousands of dollars trying to help her. This was before we switched her to species appropriate diet. And my vet, bless his soul, this is when I lived in LA. He was so kind and so sweet. And I mean, I lived around the corner from him, so we were there like every week for a while. And it was just, at one point, it was just management. I mean, her hair was falling out, her paws were swollen. It was so, I mean, I was just like sobbing, like trying to help her. Like, it was so awful. And it was like a concoction of medications that finally got it under control. And then, I mean, that was after months of trying stuff, and it was change your diet and try all these different things, and nothing was working. It was like, okay, now it's finally under control. And then of course she put on weight from the medication, and then her arthritis got worse, and it was just this down. And then it's like, okay, now she has to be on this medication her whole life. And it's like, that's the solution, just to be on medication for the rest of her life? It's like, obviously has side effects and is not good for her. Now has no allergies, she has no itchiness, she doesn't take any medication. At one point she was on like 4 different medications, like nothing. And her weight has, she's at a great weight now. So it's like, when we talk about these, I want to be careful to like make sure people know, like, this is not necessary. This isn't the vet's fault. Like, they don't know. They're not trained
it's
in
not.
this stuff. Like, I've had, I mean, don't get me wrong, I've had my fair share of not great vets. One of them took Peanut's toe off. That's a whole nother story that.
Oh my word.
Yeah. We don't have to talk about that. That's a different story. But I've also worked with incredible vets who like absolutely love them. They're so kind. They're so loving. They're so wanting. And also their toolbox is limited. So, you know, it's not for lack of trying. And I think hopefully everyone in the healthcare field, whether it's for humans or for pets, is in it to help people, to help, you know, 2 legs or 4 legs. So it's no one's fault. But again, it's that idea of if you've been told there's nothing else you can do, it's because that individual has run out of tools in their toolkit. So go to someone else who has some other tools and try some other things, because there's always. And
it's like having a dog with a burn sitting in front of you, and your first aid kit has bandages and splints. So it's going to be great for mending a broken leg, those bandages and splints, right? You can straighten out the limb, you can strap it, you can take the weight, right? But what's it going to do for a burn? Are you going to stick the bandage on the burn? It's going to stick on the burn and make it worse. Like, you can't treat that thing with that toolkit. So it's not the person who's trying to do that treatment that's in the wrong. It's that the toolkit they've got is insufficient. So when you have a bigger toolkit that has the right tools for the right, I mean, ask any carpenter or anybody who's working with physical tools, right? The right tool makes the job work. So it's as simple as that. And so if you're, like you say, if anyone's hearing that, you know, oh, we can't do that, it's like, well, let me find someone with a bigger toolbox. Yeah.
Or just different toolbox. Speaking of first aid kits, this is actually a great segue. We're having our first aid emergency. Okay, wait, let me say this. What are we calling it? Our how to build a not so basic emergency pet first aid kit. And
that rolls off the tongue.
It makes sense when you read it.
Let's call it holistic first aid.
Yeah, how to build a holistic first aid kit, which was born out of your experience the other week with Pippin. So if you guys didn't hear that story, tune into our live a couple weeks ago where you shared what happened with Pippin and how he was attacked by a neighbor cat and was bleeding. But and not only, you know, with the pet hospital an hour away, it was really on you to not only keep him alive, but you had tools in your toolkit to support him not only physically but also mentally and emotionally, through both conventional, you know, bandages and whatnot, but also these holistic integrative essential oils. And, you know, I know you have your mushrooms in there, and you have like all these different and plants and herbs and all these different things that really equipped you to keep him stable, alive, calm, and get him there so that he could you know, get more emergency services. And I know you were ready in case, you know, you had to do rehydration tablets and all these things, which thankfully you didn't have to do. But, you know, when we were talking about that, it was like, everyone needs this. Like, I need this. Can we talk about this for a second? That's when I know we need to do a workshop, is when I'm like, Penny, I want to learn more about this. I'm guessing other people do too. And you're like, really? Everyone has this giant toolbox of holistic. Like, no, they don't.
Yeah, you're our canary in the coal mine, and if you start singing, then it's like, okay, let's pay attention.
So that's coming up on Thursday. It's $20 to attend, and not only can you come live, so it's at noon Eastern, which is 5 p.m. UK, 9 a.m. Pacific. You can come live, obviously, but you'll also get lifetime access to the recording. And you're putting together an amazing list for us, Penny, of like some of your favorite. So like what you have in your kit, like a full-on list, and then some links to some different products that you actually recommend and use. So all of that is included. And as an announcement,
I was going to say, yeah, that's all very true. But let's get to the really exciting thing, which is that we have a surprise. We're bringing in an expert, a really impressive expert who teaches and has taught pet first aid for, I think he says 40 years, but it doesn't look like it could possibly be for. Anyway, very, very experienced animal first aid trainer. So Dr. Jeff Grognet is coming into our workshop with us to take a live training through several of the really common first aid dramas, issues, problems, emergencies, so that you can not just learn how to build a kit and what should go in it and how to use that, which is key. Because if I didn't have the kit, what would I have done? But equally, if I didn't know what I was doing, what would I have done? And then more importantly, again, what would have happened to Pippin? So it's you've got to have both halves of this. So we're really, really pleased to announce that we're bringing you both halves of the equation. It won't be a full course because a workshop, we just don't have the time for that. But we do have some good opportunities for you there and some other things to look forward to as well. So do join us if you've ever wanted to know what to do in an emergency, because it's not just what to have, it's what to do.
Yeah, I just shared the link. I think this is going to show up on YouTube. It might not show up on Facebook, but I'll go in and drop the link later. Yes, this is brand new. So if you guys were thinking about maybe this is something you're interested in, now you have this extra bit. And I know he has a lot of resources as well that he'll be sharing on. If you want to go even further, he has so many different, like you said, he's so experienced and such an expert in this world that he's going to be sharing those resources with us. So we're really excited to have him. This is something that 1 in every 3 pets has a pet emergency every year. So like that's every year. So chances are your pet's going to have an emergency at some point. It's not really a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So let's make sure we're prepared for that so that we're never in a situation where we're thinking, what if, or I should have, or I could have. So we will see you Thursday. We'll also see you tomorrow for another live at 9:30 a.m. Eastern. So until then, guys, talk soon.
See you later, guys.